Hello friends, we have been discussing about the book The World Bank, a critical primer written by the economist Toussaint. It has become very clear that the World Bank is neither created for bringing out development in third world countries, nor for abolishing poverty from the world. So that is very clear. And the decision-making process in the World Bank is very undemocratic. For that you need 85% consensus. But America itself is having veto share, the veto power 16.5%. So it is not possible to move a resolution which is against the interest of America. So continuing to that, Toussaint says, since 1960, the World Bank started to intervene in the internal affairs, political affairs of the borrowing countries. But the World Bank completely denies that these are all political interventions. It explains that its policies are unrelated to the power relations or political and economic spheres are different, separate. In the World Bank Charter, Article 4, Section 10 says the World Bank and its officials shall not interfere in the political affairs of any member state, nor shall the political characteristic of member states influences their decisions. And their decision will be made on economic grounds. These considerations shall be weighed impartially as stated in Section 1. This is what stated in the Charter. Plus, World Bank has found many systematic means of getting around the prohibition on taking political and non-economic consideration into account in its operations. The World Bank has repeatedly violated Article 4 of its statutes. In fact, the World Bank has made many choices purely on political grounds, and it does not make decisions based on the quality of economic policies or standard of economic policies of the nation states. They have several times given loans and financed countries rampant with corruption. World Bank often aided countries where the standard of economic policies are poor and rampant with corruption. And the World Bank's choices are consistently aligned with the interest of and the perspectives of the World Bank's key stakeholders, especially the United States of America. From 1947 until the collapse of the Soviet bloc, the decisions of the World Bank on the international monetary funding are largely determined by some of the following criteria. World Bank hate economic self-sufficiency, and it is very particular in avoiding the formation of self-sustaining economic models. It often finances only large mega projects such as dam construction and white elephant projects, and also it only policies which increases the exports of the developed countries. World Bank and IMF refuse to assist nation states which are considered to be a threat to the US government and its other key stakeholders. World Bank and IMF try to change the government policies of the socialist countries in Soviet Union and thereby weaken their solidarity. That's why they supported Yugoslavia when it was broken its ties with the Soviet Union in 1948. And Romania was only supported after it withdrew from Comcan and Warsaw Pact. Comcan is the economic union of the socialist countries. And they only supported the strategic allies of the Western capitalist bloc, especially the United States. And they supported the dictatorship regimes in Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, Nicaragua, and apartheid in South Africa. They tried their best to avoid the third world countries in forging closer connections with the Soviet Union and China as much as possible, and also they kept the Soviet Union out of India and Sukarno era Indonesia. To implement this policy, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have generalized certain strategies. They gave the right-wing governments more flexibility in implementing the austerity measures when faced with a strong left opposition. They put pressure on the left-wing governments facing strong right-wing opposition. The international financial institution imposed stringent conditions on left-wing governments to weaken them and to make it easier for the right-wing governments to come to power. By the same logic, minimal conditions were put forward on the right-wing governments to avoid weakening the governments. And the US government refused to make any loans to France as long as the French Communist Party was in the French ruling coalition. So this resulted in the removal of the French Communist Party from the French ruling coalition. Then only World Bank provided loans to France. In 1947, United States dropped the loans to Poland and Czechoslovakia because they are ruled by communists. And these clearly show the direct influence of the US administration in the political choices of the World Bank. Guatemala was unable to obtain loans from the World Bank until its communist regime was overthrown in 1955. And the United States overthrew the new Sandinista regime through various means, political initiatives, economic and military means. Against this, the Nicaragua sued the United States at The Hague. In 1986, the United States was condemned for violating international law and for violating the sovereignty of another country. In 1969, during the regime of Salvador Allende, Chile was denied a loan because of the pressure given from the US government. After Chile nationalized its copper mine, United States put pressure on the World Bank not to give any loan to Chile, and only after the assassination of Salvador Allende after 1973 only the World Bank gave loans to the dictatorship over there. After the triumph of Cuban Revolution in 1959, to quell the revolution from spreading like wildfire to other countries, Washington was forced to make some concessions to Latin American government and people. Former head of Peru's central bank recalls the consequences of this event. Between 1959 and 1960, Latin America gained full benefits because of Fidel Castro's revolution. So American Development Bank was made and started, and a coffee agreement was signed, and Latin America's demands to fix commodity prices were accepted. He also said in early 1960s the AIDS continued to increase after Cuba nationalized all its assets and signed a trade agreement with the Soviet Union. US President Eisenhower traveled to South America. On his return to America, he wrote like he was determined to initiate historic measures to bring out social reforms for the benefit of all the people of Latin America. All of a sudden, he became concerned about the people of Latin America. This is just to prevent the revolution from spreading to other parts of the country. US President Eisenhower also said, a question of what to do with the world's revolutionary turmoil is constantly before us. So we need new policies to quell the people's unrest in the troubled spot. So we had to raise the salaries of teachers and had to start hundreds of vocational schools. To prevent the spread of revolution in the world, we must not implement some of our old ideas. So they started with new tactics, and there is a sharp shift in the US foreign policy toward Latin America after that. And they also decided to support land reform. Because of the pressure from the United States, World Bank stopped lending to Vietnam. Similarly, it also stopped lending to Sandinista. Sandinistas strongly insisted the World Bank to give loans, and they also said they were ready to accept any drastic structural reform. Even after that, the World Bank didn't give any loan to Sandinista. And Sandinista received a loan from the World Bank only in 1990 when the US backed the candidate won the elections. After the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall, World Bank started reducing its loan because it no longer see any threat coming from the socialist countries. The strategic and political interests of the major capitalist powers are the determining factors in World Bank policies, and nations with the support of capitalist powers received financial aid despite not implementing sound economic policies and failing to respect human rights. Countries hostile to the great powers are not given loan on the pretext that economic criteria have not been met. These policies of the Bretton Woods institutions were not abandoned at the end of the Cold War, and they continue to this day. In the 1950s and 1960s, World Bank continued to extend loans to colonial powers. It supported the implementation of programs that increased the exploitation of the natural resources and people of the colonial countries. World Bank refused to implement a UN resolution voted in 1965 not to provide any financial or technical support to Portugal because Portugal did not emancipate the colonies. World Bank supported and funded the dictatorships in Philippines and Chile, and when these dictatorships were replaced by democratic governments, the liability of repaying the loans taken by the dictatorships were imposed upon the democratic governments, and it became a huge burden on those countries. The people were forced to pay back the loans taken by the dictators to buy weapons to oppress the people. World Bank supported authoritarian regimes that implemented anti-social policies and crimes against humanity, and protecting the human rights is never a part of its activities. World Bank refused to implement a resolution voted by the UN General Assembly in 1964 that no UN body should finance South Africa's apartheid regime. It supported the apartheid regime in South Africa from 1951 to 1968, which is a violation of the UN Charter. World Bank often sees human rights as a stumbling block to development, equality also seen as a barrier to growth. IMF and the World Bank have never hesitated to support dictatorships out of opportunism. The author of the Human Development Report published by the United Nations Development Programme stated that in black and white. He said that there is an inverse relationship between the aid received by countries and the level of human rights in the country. If there is a rampant human right abuse, the countries received good loans from World Bank. World Bank intervened in Indonesia's internal affairs. It supported a dictatorial regime that invaded East Timor and committed crimes against humanity. It implemented mega projects in Indonesia, and natural resources of Indonesia were looted for the profit of international corporations. And aggressive activities were carried out against tribal people. In 1997, when Indonesia was severely affected by the Southeast Asian crisis, the recommendation given by IMF and World Bank worsened their economic situation. And World Bank pressurized Indonesia to repay the loan even when it was severely ravaged by the tsunami, which is very unjust. This is to be continued in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.